To experience insightful contemporary art in Ocean County, visit any one of its many galleries and exhibits, or the nearest branch of the Ocean County Library. Throughout August 2021, the Barnegat branch features the art of Marty Mayo, an individual whose depth and imagination presents itself on canvas and also on guitar. Take us back to the beginning. What was it that triggered the artistic streak in you? When did you know that this is what you wanted to do?
Well, my dad was a graphic designer. He used to commute in and out of Manhattan, and he would show me samples of other artists' work. And I was just always drawing, always creating. And he was a very positive influence on my creation process.
Mm-hmm. What sort of media did he work in?
He was basically a graphic designer, but I remember one specific time where he was drawing all my brothers and sisters with pastels. And I remember that night vividly because it was one of the few times that I saw him actually drawing, because graphic design, he didn't really draw, he organized things or designed things on the page. But I distinctly remember that time he drew everybody in the house with the pastels, and I still have that drawing framed in my house today.
One thing I noticed about your work is that you're a people watcher.
Definitely.
You study human nature and you study the human condition. And that's one thing that struck me about so many of your pieces, is that it's not simply a rendition of an individual, but what's going on in and around that individual. And the more I looked at the work, the more I found detail after detail around the subject and even in the subject. You could have just drawn an individual, but you filled it in with all these details.
I think that grew out of me drawing every day. The practice of just drawing, whether I'm in a doctor's office, in the waiting room, I'm always sketching somebody in there, trying not to make it too obvious where they might catch me drawing them, then I'll look away. But that was definitely, I went to Parsons School of Design and I studied illustration there, and one of my professors was very clear about drawing every day and making that a part of your practice. And I've tried to keep to that to this day. So it's not only the figure I'm drawing, but I'm looking at the environment to kind of tell a story with whatever objects may be surrounding that figure, rather than just focusing on the figure itself. And I think that's how it blossomed out of just that practice of drawing every day, which I think is so important.
And all of those details seem to be structured into a very subtle sort of social commentary. I noticed a number of your pieces that I believe you did during the pandemic, during the height of the pandemic. And it kind of said things about the condition in which we were living under isolation and the regrouping of people. I remember distinctly one that wasn't a specific COVID piece, but it was a man perched on an examination table holding a couple of tablets in his hand.
Okay. I think that was actually done prior, many years ago, for the Washington Post. I did that illustration. It had to do with pharmaceutical drugs, but yeah, it does. A lot of the drawings I've done and the subject matter could definitely relate to the pandemic.
Now that was a really telling piece, and the thing that grabbed me was not just that he was sitting on an examination table holding a pair of pills, but he was contemplating them. He was pensive. What other newspapers have you been published in?
a long time ago, but the New York Times, the Boston Globe, the Interview magazine, which was Andy Warhol.
Yeah.
So I was excited about those. The Progressive, there were many newspapers and magazines that I was published in right after school and into the 1990s.
When I look at your work, I see a lot. I'll give you my impressions of influences, but you tell me what they really are, okay? Because when I'm looking at your work, I see a little bit of Magritte. I see a little bit of Jules Feiffer. I see a little bit of Sergio Aragonés. I see a little bit of Burke Breathed, Gahan Wilson. I see all of these people. And that's my experience. So tell me yours. Who influenced you in terms of creating what you do?
Alan E. Kober was a great influence on me. He was an illustrator in the 70s, and that was going back to my dad bringing home samples of other artists' work, and he made a huge impact on me. Robert Andrew Parker was one of my professors at Parsons, and then people like Picasso and Magritte, which you mentioned, Salvador Dali. So all the surrealist painters are a big influence on what I do.
I do see a lot of surrealism in there, and a little touch of cubism now, too. So outside of furtively looking at people in the waiting room and sketching them, where do you get your inspiration?
It comes from everywhere. Even when I'm on the line at the bank, I'll look at the person next to me in the car next to me, and I'll have my sketchbook with me, and I'll do a little quick drawing while I'm stopped driving. And it's become that much of an obsession where most of my time I try to use my hands and create something.
Marty, how do you categorize it? What if it had to fall into a category, what would it be?
When I came out of school, I wanted to be an illustrator. I thought that was the best thing I could do, be an illustrator. But I had a professor in college, and he knew I was getting some work published in the New York Times, and he called me aside and said, maybe you want to think about being a film director, or I guess he wanted to push me a little further than being an illustrator. I like to think my work now is leaning more towards fine art, and I try to think of myself as more of an artist rather than an illustrator.
I can see that in the composition. You have a very unusual mixture, a singular mixture of the sharpness of a pen line and the softness of almost a watercolor. So what media do you employ for the most part?
I like using materials that are inexpensive. I use house paint. I use acrylic, ink. It's mixed media, definitely, that I use. Collage. I try to use a lot of different materials because I feel that using a certain material will bring upon a certain idea, and if I switch media, it'll sometimes spark a new direction.
Do you do much work in collage?
I go through phases where I do. Right now I'm not, but my brother is an artist too, and he works in collage a tremendous amount. My father did a lot of collage work and assemblage work, reminiscent of Joseph Cornell's work. So those influences are always in the back of my mind.
When you want to stretch, when you want to push your boundaries out a little bit and move into, expand your media horizons, what media do you experiment with?
I think oil paint I stay away from because of the expense and the materials, the fumes and all. But that was always challenging for me, the oil paint. I did a lot of that in college. But maybe I'll get back to that someday. I know my sons recently said, why don't we try oil paint? And I said, I try not to be negative, but it's not my favorite.
We talked a little bit about, sketching people and getting ideas from that. Do you rely solely on sketches? Do you use models? Do you use your imagination to come up with some of them?
A lot of the paintings I do, it's strictly imagination. Sometimes I'll do a drawing of a person in a park or wherever, and I'll incorporate that into a painting by collaging it in or repainting it, redrawing it. But mostly the paintings come from imagination. But I think the daily drawing informs the paintings.
And daily living informs the paintings. There are numerous messages that you're sending in so many of your pieces, which it actually tells us a little bit about what's going on inside you and your observations of the world, which I think great art always does. And do you find that your perspective changes from time to time? Do you look at older pieces and go, well, I don't think that way anymore? Have you evolved that way, and has your work evolved with you?
I think, yeah, it's constantly evolving, constantly changing, and I do look back on things and think, wow, where did that come from? Or I noticed my eyesight was a lot better starting out because I worked very small to fit into magazines, and now I favor a broader, larger canvas to work in.
Tell us about your most recent one.
I think one of the more recent ones, it's here in the Barnegat Library, is it's something based on Halloween, and I used spray paint, I used house paint, acrylic ink. I think there's some collage going on in there, and I've been more and more intrigued with the holiday Halloween, so that's a big influence in there. And I don't know how it all relates, Halloween and the pandemic, and there's a lot of different things going on. I just kind of put it all into a blender and press start, and whatever comes out, comes out.
Maybe it's fear.
I think that's a lot of it. I am a very...
Halloween is scary when you're a kid.
True.
The pandemic is scary when you're an adult.
Well, that's interesting, yeah. It's a lot of subconscious and anxiety that I channel my anxieties into the painting and drawing.
Is it kind of therapy for you when you do that?
Oh, immensely. I'd be lost without it.
Your work has been not only on exhibit here, but you're a fairly frequent, from what I understand, you're a frequent visitor to the Pine Shores Art Association.
Yes, I go for drawing classes there quite a bit. I haven't been doing it in the summer because I've been doing a lot of drawing at different locations, caricatures. I draw caricatures, and I'm busy with that at Nardi's on Long Beach Island and Loretta Winery on the weekends. So I'm always peddling my caricature business.
You do really good, there's a caricature of Leonardo DiCaprio among your work. That was a good one.
Thank you. Yeah.
I mean, they're all good, but that
Thanks.
one really stuck out.
Thank you. Yeah.
Was that from a photo?
Yes. Yeah. My wife's a huge fan of Johnny Depp, so I have a lot of him too. She's the one who's more in tune with who's a movie star and who's on television, so I'll ask her, who should I try a caricature of? And she'll give me different ideas.
From what I know of caricature, it's kind of homing in on key elements of an appearance and expanding them or shaping them so that it defines the individual. How do you know what you're looking for?
I try not to go crazy with exaggeration and border on the grotesque, or I try to make it somewhat flattering to people, especially when I'm doing them on locations and when I'm doing parties. I try to make them so that people don't get offended. It's just part
That's
of my...
not me.
Exactly.
Well, yes, it is. It's just my version of you. So there's a little bit of psychology involved in that too. I mean, you have to be able to read somebody, and you have to be able to interpret that individual, and then present it back to them, and take into account that sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot going on in there.
It sure is.
The brain is always working.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You didn't get a degree in psychology too, did you?
Maybe I should have.
Another thing that you may, if you're a Marty Mayo fan, you already know, but everyone else who is just coming into this, you may be familiar with Marty and The Martians, and this is Marty. And that's a whole other story into itself. When you're not painting, you're strapping on a guitar. How's that experience for you?
I like it because I get to interact with other individuals, and the art is more of an isolating practice. But the band, I get to see other people, interact with the audience. We're a fun band, a party band, I guess you could say. And we do a lot of cover songs. And we have a female vocalist, Desiree, guitar, bass, drums, and keyboards. And it gets me out of the house. And it gets me in front of people and interacting with others. So
Let's plug everybody in the band. Who is in the band?
Mike Leonard is the lead guitarist. He used to perform in a band called Bad Attitude out of Rahway, New Jersey. Mark Lingholm is bass guitar. I've been playing with him since high school. Tom Torhan on keyboards, lives in Pennsylvania and commutes from Pennsylvania to gigs in New Jersey. His cousin, Mike Kaminsky, plays drums, and Desiree sings lead vocal, and I sing vocals too.
When a band gets up and tunes up and starts rocking out, people just take it for granted that, oh, it's always been this way. But there's a process to even taking a cover song, much less an original one, and coalescing that among all of those components, all of those people, and getting everybody basically into the same driving lane so that it comes out the way it has to come out. So for me, the fascination is in your solitude in creating art and your ability to plug into being part of a group that is on a mission to reach a common goal. And that requires a lot of cooperation.
It's not always easy. The band is like a dysfunctional family. We're dealing with 5 other personalities, and let's work on this. Well, somebody else doesn't want to. So it's run like a democracy. I used to be more of a dictator when I was starting out, but I find this works better. Everybody has a voice and everybody gets heard. We try to let everybody have a point of view that's expressed.
And, there are points for and against in both instances. When you're running the band, you kind of take on all of the responsibility, and then you, by extension, are shaping that band and expecting people to conform to that. In a democracy, you're going to have more arguments, and you're going to have more discussion, but you are ultimately you're paying respect to everybody for their individual talent, and you have essentially the same product at the end, just reaching it by a different route.
Yeah.
So you have one big happy family, right?
It depends on the night. It depends on the performance, how it goes. But we do try to have fun, and I think people that come to see us forget about life for a while. And
well, as you said, you're a party band.
yeah, it's a wonderful feeling to know that the music is lifting somebody's spirits.
You got some gigs coming up?
Yeah, we're playing at the Shillelagh Club in Belmar this Friday coming up. We play regularly at the Old Causeway in Manahawkin and Artie's on Long Beach Island. So we have a few gigs coming up, yeah.
That's great. That's great. And after the summer's over, you continue that.
Yeah. Hopefully things will keep opening up for us.
I'm going to get back to art a second. We talked about who influenced you. We talked about the way you have evolved. There's a whole generation that's coming up that's evolving too, including, I believe, your sons.
Yep, I have twin boys that are studying at University of the Arts in Philly, and they are doing really exciting work with pen and ink and watercolor. And I took my sons on just a trip to a local store that was closed down. It's been closed down for months, and we sat and we painted the storefront in our sketchbooks. And ever since then, they've just exploded with going to different locations and drawing and painting. And I'm very proud of them. It's really exciting to see that.
Now, we talked about your father's influence on you. Do you see any of your influence moving into their generation?
Yeah, I see a lot of influences, and they're inspiring me. I mean, I see their work, and I'm like, wow, I better get going here. I got a lot catching up to do. They're very good.
They're keeping you young.
Yeah.
And that's a job that gets harder as the years go by, isn't it?
Yeah, I feel it. I feel the aches and pains when I wake up in the morning.
Oh, you're not there yet, Sonny. Got a ways to go. I'll tell you about it. But it's a real pleasure. You're a fun guy to talk to, and you're very informative. This has been a lesson.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
You're a good man, Marty Mayo.
Thank you.
You can see all this at martymayo.com, and you can find out about Marty and the Martians. And I mean, it's an explosive webpage. When you see it, you'll understand. But if you're in the area, go to the Barnegat branch throughout the month of August, and you'll see Marty Mayo's work on the walls. It's exceptional. Thanks for stopping by. And find out more about our podcasts on Anchor FM, Breaker Audio, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, and Spotify. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for hundreds of informative, creative, and fun videos. And follow the Ocean County Library on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, and Snapchat. For the Ocean County Library, I'm Tom Longelli. Thanks for stopping by.
Support public libraries. Like, share, and subscribe for more great videos.